Sometimes in life, it feels like things just drift away until they run into something else, kind of like we see in this situation here, except this one's a little more realistic instead of metaphoric. Welcome back, guys. It is your boy Broncos Guru, and it's this week's episode of Boating News of the Week. Our first incident to make the boating news this week is going to show you what it's like when you're coming home from a sailing trip and all of a sudden you divert to try and assist the Coast Guard in a rescue. Captain Brim and his crew were returning to South Florida on their sailing vessel when all of a sudden they were passing through an area where a shrimping boat had sank 3 days prior. Coast Guard crews were still doing their search and rescue, but Captain Brim and their crew got lucky and actually spotted the lifeboat from this shrimping vessel with one of the crew member aboard and still alive. The fishermen had been floating at sea for over 3 days in 50-knot winds and freezing temperatures. Captain Brim and one of his crew members, Hamish McDonald, quickly got the gentleman aboard and they contacted the Coast Guard, who then came over and pulled the gentleman off of their vessel. This fisherman was extremely lucky this crew came by. The Coast Guard really had been struggling trying to find this fisherman due to the extreme weather conditions they've been experiencing. Our next incident on the boating news is going to show us what it's like when you're out there in the ocean barely hanging on. Not just surviving, but barely hanging on to anything left on your boat.
We just rescued one person from a capsizing boat.
This is the scene when this gentleman's boat started taking on water about 90 miles off the coast of Florida and wound up capsizing. He was hanging on like this for a little over 24 hours.
So he's taking care of him, gives him some blankets and some dry clothes.
Had been working on the engines, squealing noises and several parts on it. I was working on it, but I was asleep when the water gushed in the back and forced me up to the...
I have to imagine being on your vessel in the middle of the ocean and being woken up by rushing water forcing you to the front of the boat being absolutely terrifying.
I thought it was, this is it. And then I saw a container vessel in the distance, and I don't have my glasses. I couldn't see if it was coming to me or not, but I began waving and took my shirt off and waved periodically.
I can tell you, cannot imagine the feeling that you had when you saw that vessel come in.
Being almost 90 miles off the coast of Florida, that was going to mean a massive search area for the Coast Guard. Fortunately, this container vessel came by and absolutely saved this gentleman's life. Our next item to make the boating news this week is going to be the Golden Ray, which is a 200-meter car-carrying vessel that capsized in St. Simon back in September of 2019. Now, I know that makes this a little bit of an old story, but what's bringing it back to light now is until this point, this vessel's still pretty much been sitting intact in St. Simon. Just this past week, they finally started cutting it into the 8 sections they're going to have to cut it into to remove it. They cut the first section off and laid it onto a barge, as can be seen right here. After making this first cut, we're finally starting to get some of the first images of what we can see, what it looks like inside the vessel. And I'll tell you what, it looks like absolute chaos. Just tons of cars flipped over and crushed. This has got to be an absolute insurance nightmare. They also say that it might be an environmental nightmare as well. As can be seen here, they have debris falling out of the vessel into the water as they're trying to take this thing apart. It'll be interesting to see how this progresses as they start to take the other 7 pieces apart as well. Our next incident to make the boating news this week is going to take us up to Alaska, where we're going to see a harrowing Coast Guard medevac. This is the fishing vessel Frontier Spirit, whose chief engineer began experiencing abdominal pain on their most recent fishing trip. After a brief conversation with a Coast Guard surgeon, it was determined that the best course of action was an actual medevac to get this gentleman off the vessel. But as you can tell here, this is not ideal conditions to try and do this in. This boat right here is a massive fishing vessel, and these have to be 20 to 30 foot seas. This is an absolute precision operation that the Coast Guard pulls off successfully. They wind up pulling this gentleman off this vessel, getting him back to the mainland, and getting him the medical attention that he needs. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode of Boating News of the Week. If you ever see anything crazy happening on your waterways, be sure to hit me up on Facebook or Instagram and let me know, and you might see your stories over here. And if you haven't already, go ahead and drop an anchor on the subscribe button. If not, I'm coming to steal your drain plug.